Everybody, welcome. Any questions, comments? Please request to speak. Tesla stock flat today. Quite a bit of a movement in the last hour or so. But it's been generally flat over the last 3 weeks. Wow, actually over the last 5 months. It's been mostly between $150 and $200 per share throughout the 5-6 months. Overall markets, Dow Jones up 0.2%, NASDAQ flat, S&P 500 flat, Russell 2000 down 1.3%. Russell 2000 is the 2000 small cap stocks. Oil is down again 1% today. Natural gas down 6%. Therefore, oil stocks are down quite a bit again, back-to-back days. Inflation fears have dissipated quite a bit in the last couple of days with oil prices coming down so sharply. Treasury yields are down 5-6 basis points throughout the curve on the back of double-digit drops yesterday. So that's quite a bit of a difference in last 2-3 days on treasury yields. All right, with that backdrop, Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing good. I thought it was also interesting that Aramco is actually raising right now.
Raising cash?
Yeah, raising cash, selling equity in Aramco and raising cash to quote unquote help move the economy off oil, help diversify off oil.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago they tried to go IPO the entire thing in I think New York Stock Exchange actually, and they couldn't because nobody wanted to pay the valuation they were looking for. Was it 2 trillion? What was the valuation they were looking for at the time?
Yeah, it was 2 trillion. The primary concern of the Saudis enlisting in the New York Stock Exchange was A, the valuation, but B, also the disclosures required to list in the United States. They also worried that there could be lawsuits or things like that. There was legislation that allowed US citizens to sue the Saudi government over 9/11. A lot of the 9/11 hijackers were Saudis. So there was concern about legal issues and disclosures and things like that. And they ended up listing on the Saudi Arabian stock market. So I'm not sure what their market cap is today. It did get up there, but obviously, the Saudi market is a little bit different than the US market in terms of some of the regulations and disclosures.
Yeah, yeah, I think they ended up selling just a small portion on their own exchange,
Right.
which I thought was kind of interesting.
Very small percentage of the float, like 1%.
Exactly. So it's almost like can't even trust whatever the market cap is, you know. 6.82 divided by
Yeah.
3.75. You're
I mean,
looking
this is
at
kind of
about
like the
1.8
oldest.
there. Yeah,
This is the
1.8
oldest trick
trillion
in the
dollar market
book.
cap. Hmm.
This is the oldest trick in the book for startups. You go, okay, here, buy, one share of my company for $1 million. Now I'm worth X billion dollars when it's, obviously a very small amount being transacted. So, I think they're worried, really. They're worried about the fate of this business long term. And the fact that they're trying to diversify, meaning sell the shares and get cash, really kind of says it all.
Inflexity.
Yeah, so they have a market cap of 1.82. So technically, they are increasing the float by 0.65% only. And a big reason for that is that they had to cancel a few city projects after they failed to achieve foreign direct investment targets. So they canceled out like a few cities that they were intending to build.
Interesting. Thank you. Do you put together a set of interesting facts before the space joins?
No, just Bloomberg.
Bloomberg. Okay, gotcha. Cool. All right. Alan Mobley says in YouTube live chat, I canceled my Model Y order with the 0.99% interest rate after Tesla lowballed the trade in offer at the last minute after originally offering a sound offer on my 2020 Model 3 with FSD, a $5,000 swing. Omar, this comes on the heels of what you were talking about yesterday with your Model S trading, having another 5K difference.
Yeah, sounds like it's a pretty common occurrence. I probably would have not canceled the order since they're not giving away that 0.99% interest rate anymore. So now he's kind of lost it permanently. And you could have probably taken it somewhere else, sold it privately, sell it on Craigslist, sell it on a website like carsandbids.com, Doug DeMiro's website that sells a lot of Teslas, or just go take it to CarMax or Carvana, and they often give a better price too. So I definitely don't think it's worth canceling over, but they've kind of been known to give lower values.
Yeah. So you don't think that 0.99% deal is going to come back anytime soon, huh?
I think it will at times when they need it. Hopefully they don't need it, but it's possible. I think we could see it again next quarter in the second month or something like that. But of course, there's no way to know for sure. It's a sales incentive they can apply when they need to generate additional demand.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, looking at the inventory trackers, which may or may not be accurate, um, but Troy seems to think that they're accurate enough to rely on them. So that's good enough for me. Um, the 0.99% deal really made um, the inventories of Model Y decline quite a bit in recent weeks. And then subsequently, we saw Tesla increase that financing rate to 1.99% for the 72-month option. So that also indicates the demand was higher than they expected, even. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Tesla does with that subvented loans in June and subsequent months. Alan says on YouTube Live, no better offers elsewhere. So it looks like he checked Twitter first. So I guess maybe Tesla was. I mean, that time tells me Tesla was overpaying, and then they reversed it, I guess. All right. Okay. Um, so we have a bit of a back and forth today with the CNBC article. Let's get right into it. I'm going to pin Elon's response to the article at the top as well. Omar, what did you think of this article that came out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it strikes me as FUD. I think we're probably going to see a lot of FUD accelerating into the vote next week. Stories designed to make you think Elon's horrible, he's abusing his power, he's hurting the company, he is breaking the law, and we would be better off without him. And when you dig into the details, the story isn't usually what it seems. So a lot of people read this story and said, oh, Tesla paid for these GPUs, but XAI is using them. And that's legal. Well, that's not what's happening here. That's not what CNBC is even alleging. What CNBC is citing is an internal memo in NVIDIA where they said, hey, Tesla had an order for 12,000 GPUs. They're saying have XAI take delivery of them instead. This was in December 2023. Have XAI take delivery of them instead. And they're going to take delivery of the order that was supposed to be for XAI, which is coming in January and June. So both companies now have already taken delivery of these GPUs in question, but XAI kind of took delivery of that first slot in December that was originally supposed to go to Tesla. And each company obviously paid for it. Now, Elon has come in and he said, we're trying to build a new Dojo data center in Austin. We plan to have 50,000 H100s go there, but we don't have necessarily room. The construction project was delayed a little bit. We had heard that before. that the expansion of Giga Texas to support the data center was delayed a little bit. And so they said, all right, let's send it to XAI first. This is actually beneficial to Tesla for a few reasons. First of all, the agreements they have with NVIDIA are take or pay. So you have to either take the GPUs or pay anyway. And this is, so I would point you to Tim Zaman's post. He used to be the head of AI infrastructure at Tesla and also at X and XAI. So he's probably more qualified to speak on this subject than anybody. And he said, here's what just a few hundred GPUs looks like, right? Taking delivery of thousands of these things is like a massive industrial effort. So I don't think Tesla's getting shortchanged here. I don't think they're not building up training compute. And I don't see it as really much of a conflict of interest. As we've discussed before, I don't believe that it's in Tesla's best interest to train a large language model right now. Buying 100,000 GPUs and dedicating them to training a large language model would be a mistake for Tesla. And they're certainly not in a financial position where they can afford to spend billions of dollars on something extra. So language models are actually important, right? They have to use one. They might have to use something like Llama 3, but that's released by Facebook, and Facebook could change the license at any time, maybe with Llama 4 or whatever. I think having them develop a large language model at this adjacent company is actually beneficial to Tesla, and they don't have to take any of the risk. And it wouldn't make sense for them to develop a large language model themselves. That's not their mission. Their mission is accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. Autonomy helps with that. Humanoid robotics helps with that. A large language model is a little bit more adjacent. So I don't see it as necessarily as much of a conflict. I think anyone who thinks Tesla's not getting the compute that they need is mistaken. They are no longer as compute constrained as they were in the past. And I think that, yeah, it's actually kind of to Tesla's benefit that they're able to use these large language models in their products, and they save them, potentially a lot of money warehousing the systems or paying in advance. Instead, they were able to sort of defer those payments and take them when they needed it. So it's not that Tesla was robbed of compute or that Tesla's not getting enough compute. I think Tesla actually benefits from this in multiple ways. One, they didn't have to pay the cash to not only buy the GPUs, but also warehouse the GPUs until they're ready to bring them up. And if you remember, 1 month before this memo was sent in December, in November, Tesla had already brought up 10,000 H100s, right? And if you remember Elon's commentary at the time, he said, we're struggling to actually bring them all up, right? It's taking time to hook them all up and everything. They didn't need more at that point. They were already setting up the last cluster that they had. So they said, all right, yeah, we'll take our additional shipment in January. The drama over something that is really pretty minor and actually benefits Tesla financially, as well as, through allowing them to use these language models once they're developed, I think is really just designed to, sow discord at a time when there's this vote coming up.
Thank you, Omar. I've seen the claims that Tesla paid for these chips that went to XAI from bearer accounts, short seller accounts, etc. And I don't know obviously either way, but I feel that if that were the case, that would be in the article.
Yeah, if they had any evidence of that. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems
Yeah.
to be that they just swapped positions on delivery order. XAI was ready. They said, okay, give it to them. We'll take the deliveries in January and June instead of in December.
Yeah. And as we discussed in previous spaces, these are things need to go hand in hand. Data needs to increase along with the training compute, along with engineering resources, and these bottlenecks shift. It's kind of like ramping a vehicle production, I think, where one day you may have, white seats, the bottlenecks, another day, another week, maybe the batteries, another week, maybe the labor. input. So there's a lot of inputs that go into this, S curve ramp. And I suspect with FSD development, it's the same case. So Elon said in a previous tweet several months ago that training compute is no longer the limiting factor. That doesn't mean it won't be in the future, but it doesn't seem to be the case right now. And the pricing actions around FSD, lowering the purchase price, lowering the monthly subscription price, indicates that maybe it is the disengagement data that they're trying to increase to train FSD. That is the limiting factor right now. So, man, that article made a lot of noise, though, for sure. If there's anyone in the audience who have a different view, you're welcome to request to speak, ask questions, share your opinions. I welcome different views from bulls and bears, and I welcome encourage debate. All right. I see Larry in the crowd. I see Bradford. You're welcome to come up. Now, another thing I want to talk about, Omar, that I want to bring this up yesterday, but we didn't have time. One of the known bear accounts, Taylor Ogan, I believe does he live in Hong Kong or China? You know who I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I think I do remember him moving to China. I think mainland China.
Yeah. And he posted an autonomous driving. But before we switch there, let's see Larry has any thoughts on the issue that we were just talking about. Larry, how are you? Larry, you're on mute. I think Larry maybe just wants to come up and join us on the speaker board. Oh, there you go. How are you?
He's in Europe, so.
Okay, yeah. Bit of a distance.
I'm struggling with this. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, you're crystal
we
clear
can
now.
hear you. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah. Listen, I don't have a lot to add from what Omar said. He said it extremely well. I mean, this is like a storm in a teacup, but every storm that they can raise, raises their hopes. And when I say their hopes, I'm talking about the bears. I mean, they are really working very, very, very hard to influence this vote that's upcoming. And we've seen this, this whole pattern before. When an important vote or important moment is coming, there's a huge amount of pressure. And, any of these stories that can break and they do break, that can raise doubts, get a lot of press. It's, it's regrettable that Tesla doesn't proactively deal with this, but they don't. That's just a reality. But the bottom line is, I think, and Omar captured it very well. I mean, Tesla have the luxury of being able to juggle this backlog of processes in an extremely efficient manner. I mean, Microsoft certainly doesn't have that capability, and neither does most of the other scale, major companies. So Tesla's in a very advantageous position, and this should be seen as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And this should be seen as a good thing rather than a bad thing. And to start doubting whether that AI paid for this and Tesla paid for that, I mean, it's just such nonsense. Anyway, I'm just here to listen and enjoy opportunities, arose that I could get on. So I'll just sit by and listen.
Thank you, Larry. I hope you're having a great time in Europe. Omar?
A lot of people say, how could the Tesla board let Elon start another company that's involved in AI when he says Tesla is an AI company? And I just want to point out, 10 years ago, in 2014, Tesla unveiled Autopilot. So they officially got into AI. They started talking about a AI future for their cars. And 1 year later, in 2015, Elon and Sam Altman founded an organization where they recruited Ilya Sutskever, Andrei Karpathy, and many others to leave their companies and join what became OpenAI, right? Now, in 2015, did anyone say, how can you do this? Is this, competing with Tesla? Nobody really cared at the time. Tesla was a much smaller company. But if he hadn't started that company, he would have never been able to poach Andrei Karpathy from OpenAI. He might have never even met Andrei Karpathy, and there wouldn't be a Tesla AI team. So you can kind of think about this in the box and say, hey, he should only be the CEO of one company and he shouldn't be allowed to do anything else. And I think if you take that kind of attitude, you end up kind of pushing him out because he just has too many interests. And brilliant people often do. Steve Jobs, he was CEO of Apple and Pixar at the same time, two very different companies, but with some overlap. And there can be a lot of benefits, right? I think Tesla has benefited from the rise of OpenAI. Obviously, they got Karpathy and he helped birth the team. I think without him, the team would not be producing software at this level today. And the caliber of talent he brought in that wanted to work with people like him was exceptional. So many times there are actually benefits from Elon's companies. This is something that a Tesla competitor like your BYDs or your Rivians or your Lucid will never be able to match. They don't have other companies involved in launching rockets, brain computer interfaces, digging tunnels, training large language models, and have access to the breadth of knowledge across all of these companies to ask questions when there's a problem, to draw on, to even move people from one company to another when there's a pressing need or when that person wants to. So a lot of people are trying to spin this as a negative, like, oh, this is the problem with Tesla that he has these other companies, but he's always had other companies and he's always been incentivized to deliver value for Tesla because he is the number one owner of Tesla shares, right? That is the one thing that secures us as shareholders from him ripping Tesla off. He is a large shareholder. He doesn't want to rip himself off, right? He wants the company to do well. And it's funny how I think a lot of the same people who are upset at him over this are probably the same people who want to vote against his compensation package. There's no doubt that this guy has a lot of other things going on. And if he were to get pushed out of Tesla, there are a lot of other things he could do. And that's precisely why we need to incentivize him to focus that value creation on Tesla. I mean, he spelled it out pretty clearly. If I don't have control over the company, I'd prefer to build new AI products elsewhere. And hopefully everybody can just understand that as they make this vote.
All right. We have Pennington on the board. Pennington is an investor in Tesla, but he's a frustrated investor. And he's been voicing his views in the space and in replies to my posts. Pennington, what's your take on this?
Look, I think what Omar said is reasonable and sound, and you can't disagree with that. However, his last point about 25% or else, that's the reason why when the story came out this morning from CNBC that there was just a high insensitivity where people just read this and they immediately jump to the conclusion or at least a reasonable suspicion that he could be checking out and preparing for a no vote and he'll be fine, but Tesla won't. So again, there's two worlds. There's a world where how this post would have been, or this article would have been received had he not put his 25% post out versus the world that exists because he did. And the reality is, until there's really some absolute resolution to his desire or ability or whatnot to stay on a Tesla, these type of stories are just going to be greeted with suspicion, sensitivity, and doubt.
Omar, Leo Kogoan says that Elon is on his best behavior in recent months because of the upcoming vote. And then once he gets his comp package ratified, he's going to check out again, which is, Pennington is, point relates to that a little bit. What do you think about that point? How can investors feel comfortable that Elon is not going to check out if this vote is ratified? He will be just as motivated as before and take Tesla to the next level.
Well, I mean, when you have a 25% stake in a company or a 20% stake fully diluted, that's a pretty powerful incentive. I mean, I think you've seen the last few months the focus he's put in the company, and the company remains the best-selling maker of electric vehicles in the world. They have a self-driving software that's unparalleled in the market. So I don't think that he's just going to check out. I don't think he ever really checked out. A lot of people who think the key to success at Tesla is him spending time at Tesla don't really understand the company.
Ahmed?
Iman, sorry, just joining, sort of listening for a second, and then we'll respond. Sorry about that.
Okay. Question for you. I'm curious. How do people usually attempt to pronounce your name?
Ahmed is usually what I get, but
Okay. Is
you
that
know
correct? What is the correct version?
it's Ahmed, just like Omar. Omar
Ahmed.
isn't the correct version, right? It's Omar. Just
Is it?
yeah. Unless you only go by Omar, but if I'm correct, it's Omar, right?
Which is it, Omar?
Well, I was born in the US. Everybody has always just said Omar.
Omar. Okay.
My parents is kind of like more like Umar, like more of like a U than an O, but mostly just Omar. That's kind of my name.
Okay. Ahmed.
Yeah, man. I mean, you pronounce it pretty well. I'm guessing you have some sort of like lingual Arabic in you.
Yeah, Turkish.
Yeah,
I mean, Turkish is not Arabic, but it's, has some
close.
components.
It's close.
It's a mix of French, Farsi, Latin alphabet. Anyway, let's switch back to Tesla. Doge Army, how are you?
Hey guys, thanks for having me up here. Appreciate you, Yaman. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think Elon will absolutely get 25% of the votes, voting control. That's what he wants. I think he will figure out a way to make it happen. There's a lot of opportunities that he can employ, share buybacks, acquiring a company like XAI. There are a lot of things that could happen even if the shareholder vote and the comp plan is struck down. I also think this whole narrative that Elon is sidetracked or not fully invested in Tesla is crazy. 2023 Model Y is the best-selling car in the world. Cybertruck is ramping. Version 12 FSD is out. These are all evidence that he is very focused on Tesla. Thank you.
Yeah, if he's doing the best-selling car in the world when he's checked out, imagine if we actually incentivized him.
He's just a lot more active on X. That's the only difference. I mean, he might have been doing the same stuff, years ago. It just, he's a lot more visible now. And so people seem to think that that means that he's not focused on Tesla, but I think it's crazy.
Man, we have so many bulls on the board right now that all the bears in the space are scared to request to speak. I know they have opinions. I know they want to share that because they do. In my replies, I get tagged with all sorts of stuff. But today, we have the dream team of bulls on the board with Omar and Larry and Doge Army ready to bite your arm off if you say anything negative about Elon. Ahmed, even Pennington, when he came up, he worded so lightly. It's so funny. I really want a balanced debate. So if you have other views, please request to speak. I will make sure your arm is in one piece. Neural net.
Hey, so just one question. I was thinking about it. So if you were gonna do the vote against, um, my mental expectation is you have a number two in mind, right? Like you voted against Elon, you don't want to pay this guy. So my question is, who would you pay? Right? Like as someone who votes against, that's like my number one question. It's not why did you vote against, it's who would you pay other than this guy? Just wondering, right? For the Bears,
Yeah,
for anyone.
yeah.
Can anyone answer that?
Well, I don't think the Bears. I
Thank
don't
you.
think the Bears are concerned about paying anybody else. I think they just want the stock to kind of crumble, so they're footprint. But there are some bulls that are concerned, investors concerned, and among those, I've never heard of an alternative proposed because they don't have any. They haven't thought it through. Ahmed, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, I was just going to talk about the article that came in earlier today, right? And then sort of the fears around he's moving resources to other companies because he's not fully vested. Those got squashed right by his remarks. And then I read a couple of comments as to why isn't Giga Texas ready to take on all of these all this new infrastructure. I mean, if you just think about the demand for compute and the breakthroughs and how quick it's been happening, data centers take a while to build out and take a while to plan. So I think nobody expected them to need this amount of compute so quickly within like 3 years ago, 2 years ago when they're planning out all of this new infrastructure build. So it kind of speaks to, yes, things might not align, and I need to make as many purchases as possible as to the compute and have it, even if the logistics of the warehouse not being built out isn't in place yet. But at least I have the infrastructure once it is. I thought that line of thinking made a lot of sense.
Bogdan.
Hi, Emma. I have a question. You've been in your space for a very long time. Do you know the number of the bulls and bears coming to this space? Like, what the percentages? Thank you.
I mean, it's predominantly the bulls. There's no question about that. But I think that's reflective of the composition outside the space too. Like it's not like back in 2017, 18, 19 when we had 25, 30, 35% short interest in the stock. So bulls today way outnumber bears, and I think it's reflective of that composition. So we don't have many bears, but I'm glad that they feel comfortable to request to speak every now and then.
Shorts are
W.
becoming an endangered species, according to Bloomberg last night.
Exactly. W.
Hi, I have a question to Omar. Why do you switch your Model S to a Model 3? Just to test the car, or are you different reasons?
Yeah, the main reason is that I got the Cybertruck and I like it and I want to keep it. And the Model S is also pretty big. So the Model 3 has most of the stuff the Model S has, but it's small, nimble. And yeah, I just wanted it. And I basically could get it for free by trading it in. And they're actually going to, give me some cash back so I can take that. I can pay off my Cybertruck loan and get a car that is, just as good, if not better. It's got the ventilated seats. It's got the screen in the rear and all the nice new stuff like the ambient lights. So I'm picking it up on Friday and I'm super excited, and I'll tweet out photos, of course, once I get it.
Neural net.
Yep, thank you. And just one other question. I was thinking about just some comparisons in regards to everyone sharing chips. So if you think about Jeff Bezos, if he was to share AWS among his companies as a benefit, would that be any different than Elon sharing compute clusters among his companies? or renting them out between companies. I mean, I think that all makes sense, and I don't know why it's a problem.
Well, they're not actually sharing any compute between the companies. They just had XAI take an order first, as opposed to Tesla, which took it in January and June instead of December.
But what I'm saying is, what if they were just to start to build services like AWS did, because it was like, listen, we're going to get DDoSed every holiday season for all the orders, so we're going to make these robust services, and then we're just going to make them available to anyone who subscribes to them. So why couldn't that happen between companies, right? Among clusters, anything else? Just wondering.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they have talked about wanting to do a cloud service. So, and the Tesla API is running off cloud.tesla.com. So, I think that's something maybe Tesla could do in the future. I also think potentially if XAI works out well and it's profitable, they could just merge it with Tesla in the future, especially if they end up on more of a collision course with each other. Right now, they're very separate. So, maybe there is an opportunity for a Tesla cloud, but right now they're just going to maintain separate compute clusters.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just think about that, right? It's like, just keep the chips busy. Doesn't matter whoever buys it, right? Commodity.
Yeah, there probably could be efficiencies if it was just one giant cluster instead of separate companies. You could allocate the, chips to FSD when needed or to the LLM when needed.
Right.
So maybe that's something they could do in the future.
Thank you.
No
they-
clue. You may unmute yourself and go ahead.
When you build out a data center with NVIDIA chips, how will those eventually work with, say, if Dojo ones work or something else? Are they compatible? Because I thought NVIDIA's biggest selling point was that they're building a moat that you had to use their software.
They are not compatible. So, you'd be able to run some of the same training workloads on both of them, but they're obviously completely separate systems. And we don't have a lot of visibility into how Dojo's comparing to the NVIDIA cluster internally. We have to assume the NVIDIA cluster is better by the fact that they're still buying them. But they haven't talked a lot about how Dojo's doing. So we'll have to wait until the next AI day or something like that for more info.
We have Elon tweet. This is the first time I've seen this reply. Elon posted again and says, I pinned it at the top. Training compute for Tesla is relatively small compared to inference compute, as the latter scales linearly with size of fleet. Perhaps the best way to think about it in terms of power consumption. When the Tesla fleet reaches 100 million vehicles, peak power consumption of AI hardware in cars will be 100 gigawatts. Training power consumption is probably less than 5 gigawatts. These are very rough guesses. Obviously, 5 gigawatts of AI training compute is enormous by current standards, but is only 5% of total Tesla AI compute. There's a path for Dojo to exceed NVIDIA. It is a long shot, as I've said before, but success is one of the possible outcomes.
Wow.
What do you think about this, Omar?
Well, that was a reply to my tweet, and I didn't even hear about it until now. I learned about it from this space. So I think I need to read this a little bit and digest it for a second.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was like, did he not see this? Yeah. Oh, he actually replied again, man. Okay, I pinned it at top 2. He says, of the roughly $10 billion in AI-related expenditures I said Tesla would make this year, about half is internal, primarily Tesla-designed AI inference computer and sensors present in all of our cars plus Dojo. For building the AI training superclusters, NVIDIA hardware is about 2/3 of the cost. My current best guess for NVIDIA purchase by Tesla are $3 to $4 billion this year, which is, I think, what we said yesterday, right? About $1 billion a quarter. Great.
Yes, I mean, I think he's kind of, trying to say, well, the combined inference compute is so great. Yeah, that's true, but that's used for inference in the car, right? That's not training compute, which is necessary to train the models. You can't use that compute to train the models. So, the real answer is the last line, which is there is a path for Dojo to exceed NVIDIA. It's a long shot, but success is one of the possible outcomes. So basically, what he's saying is it's not beating NVIDIA, but we're going to keep working on it. And I don't know if we'll succeed, but we might. So that's kind of what we expected. But yeah, it doesn't sound like they're going to be in a position to stop buying NVIDIA chips anytime soon. Maybe in 2 to 3, maybe 5 years, they could have a shot at it. But doesn't look like Dojo's there today based on his comments.
Yeah. And Christopher Stanley, who is a security engineer at SpaceX and X, commented and said, the last time Elon said success is one of the possible outcomes, he succeeded, feeling extremely bullish on Tesla right now. Michael.
Yeah, hi, Yaman. So this is a very interesting tweet from Elon, especially the one about training power consumption being 5 gigawatts. That could be a hint as to how many NVIDIA NVIDIA chips they think they need for training compute based on the current scaling laws. Does anyone know what the H100 or H200 power consumption is?
Omar?
I don't know off the top of my head. Let me do some research.
Yeah. But Michael, I mean, it's going to be a hell of an estimate too. Are you, that's we don't know if it's going to work out that way. This is several years out, obviously, right? Like 6 billion miles was also an estimate.
Yeah, it just is interesting as a snapshot in a point of time, what they think they might need based on the current scaling laws.
I asked ChatGPT and it says you can run 1.5 million H100s on a gigawatt. So that would mean, let's see, 9 million H100s. Now the Blackwells are 4 times as powerful, so you'd only need about 2 million-ish, a little more than 2 million if they were Blackwells, but sounds like we're going to be buying a lot of GPUs to solve FSD and Optimus.
Neural net.
Thanks, Evan. So one of the questions is a hardware versus a software problem, right? Like hardware is a problem until software is, and then software is a problem until hardware is. And the crappier the software you make, the harder the hardware runs. So my question is, I think eventually we're going to escape this hardware local maximum, right? Yeah, NVIDIA is great, but I mean, they're not really making software, right, guys? It's hardware. So that's great, but eventually this hardware has to make a soft value scenario. So I'm just wondering, how long this lasts until software becomes the bottleneck. Maybe it'll go back and forth, but that's my question, right? Like it's great. You get a bunch of GPUs, but garbage in, garbage out, right? Just a question. Do you think we're going to transition
Omar, would you like
from
to?
a hardware to a software bottleneck? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's at some point, right? I think that's what Sierra said as well in a different space. But we don't you're going to need a breakthrough, some sort of breakthrough on the software front for hardware to become a bottleneck anytime soon. So, Omar, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Steven Sinofsky, former Microsoft executive, said it best today when he said, we're in a chip moment right now. Everybody's focused on the chips. That's kind of the first phase. But all of these chip investments are in service of what? Creating software. So the next thing you're going to see is groundbreaking software. And without that, the chips have no value. So while current investors are focused on chips, maybe it would serve other investors to look ahead at the second and third phases of this trade, which I think are starting to play out.
Hey Omar, did you see Jensen signing boobs?
Yeah, he's
When
a
do you
rock
think
star.
maybe maybe Elon should be signing boobs for stock to go up? You know?
Yeah, I mean, worth a try.
Yeah, you can't lose. Anyway, Ravi.
Hi, Yaman. I was wondering if you still need the precise figures for power for the GPU super parts. I do that for a living, so I can give you the exact numbers.
Yeah,
Oh,
please.
perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so the way we deploy is starting with the DGX SuperPod. A DGX SuperPod is 128 servers, 1024 GPUs, with switching and everything. The precise power you need for a single block of compute SuperPod is 1.4 megawatts. Normally, foundational models are trained using a minimum of 10,000 GPU servers cluster. 10,000 GPUs is basically you're looking at 10 superpods. That's 14 megawatt. So any CSP that we're working with, tier 2, not tier 1, like big ones, their minimum requirement is 10 superpods, and they over provision their data center, not for 14 megawatts, but for like 20 megawatts. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And for Blackwell, it is very efficient. Like you said, Omar, it's much more efficient. One Blackwell rack is liquid cooled, direct to chip liquid cooling. And it is 72 Blackwell GPUs. And it is clocking at 120 kilowatt in a single rack. So, which is much more compute for less power. And my understanding is Elon wants to deploy 330,000 Blackwell GPUs in the Austin Gigafactory, the north side or the south side that is meant for liquid cooling. Only problem is like he got those H100s way too early, and the building was not ready for that. And those H100s are air cooled, and for our air cooled deployments, it takes much more time because you need much more space. Normally, you need like 36 to 40 racks per super pod with the air cooled systems, the HGX, H100 or H200. I hope this was useful. Thank you.
So you
Thank you,
agree
Ravi.
with for the H100s, it's roughly a million H100s equals 1 gigawatt.
Yes, you can scale it that way, but you need to understand that when we ask ChatGPT, they'll just probably ask the GPU power, like H100, your TDP that says in the specs is basically power of the chip, which is 750 watt per H100. In a DGX system or an HGX system from the ODMs, you have 8 H100s. But the problem is when we run it, that number is not true. The TDP is not the power of the chip, actually power of the chip plus the other electronics around the chip. The power of the board we have seen to go close to 1 kilowatt sometimes, okay? So that's why we size the cluster with 10-15% margin. So one HGX systems, to be honest, you will be safe to assume 8 H100s in an HGX or H200. You're going to clock it at 10 or 11 kilowatt. And it varies if you're running it in San Diego, sea level, or if you're running it in Colorado or Salt Lake City at higher level because of the molecular density. A lot of other calculations were required to do. But yeah, the other thing that people don't estimate is the power overhead you are required to use for the switching, the InfiniBand switches. People say, oh, the switch specs is only 1 kilowatt. But the problem is when you're using the switches in large clusters, you have to use optical cables. And when you're using optical cables, you have to use active optical transceivers, and those transceivers are hot. So a 64-port InfiniBand switch will have 64 transceivers to do the clustering across large racks, large clusters, and each of them take 20 watt. We have measured it. It takes like 15 to 20 watt when it goes hot. These are like hot optics. So every InfiniBand switch also has a 50% overhead of power. So it takes like 1.5 kilowatt. So the number I gave you is actually from the spreadsheet that we use with our customers. We actually calculate also the power required, not only for the H100 chips, but also the CPU and the memory per HGX, plus the networking gear, plus the cables. The cable take power, like per cabinet, we're taking like 3 kilowatt extra. Sorry, I exaggerated, like 1 or 2 kilowatt extra just for the hot cables, because you have to throw light right across the data center. Thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people appreciate the size of that Elon just put out. 5 gigawatts is like the entire peak demand of a state like New Hampshire or Maine or Idaho. That's like, it's a small state basically of 1.3 to 2 million people, is the power demand that he's looking for his training compute. So that's absolutely massive, and that will require a lot of utility infrastructure upgrades, and will take a lot of time. So I think it's not the first time we will be hearing about a training compute cluster being delayed. But Ravi, I wanted to ask the question. So you basically said, I think to simplify, it's about 20 megawatts for a 10,000 GPU server rack, right? So does that mean 5 gigawatts is 2.5 million GPU servers, GPUs?
It doesn't scale linearly because with multiple superpods being connected, the switching is more complicated. So the other thing you have to consider is cost of cooling. What is your PUE? PUE is a factor that you use to measure data center cooling. And the open compute data center that Meta, Facebook 10 years ago designed, their PUE was 1.1, which was the lowest in the industry, using free cooling in North Carolina. But yeah, it varies because you have to provision, you have to understand, like, if your cluster takes X amount of megawatts or gigawatts to run, you must provision 20-30% on top of it to cool that cluster. And sometimes in deep learning matrix multiplications, you have peak surge when the workload starts. And I have, in my life, I have burned a lot of circuit breakers in data centers when my customers were running those deep learning tasks. So normally we tell customers, like, please provision at least 40% over budget your power. But yeah, just multiplying the power of one superpod and with the number of GPUs scalability is probably not a right way. But what you are doing is right. I would recommend you, for 10,000 GPUs, you multiply by 10 the power.
Ravi, your connection went bad, but I'm sure I'm going to be looking forward to a Michael thread. Michael puts out these amazing threads. He's on the board right now. His handle is "Do you want to know?" So, Ravi, I'm going to put you on mute because your connection is horrible. Oh, goodness, what is happening here? Can you guys hear, or is it just me?
Yeah. No, we're good. He was breaking up though.
You can't hear him? Oh,
no,
okay.
He was breaking up. Yeah.
Okay, great. Anyway, just
Sounds like his
a side
networking's
note.
overheating, maybe.
Is your GPUs got delayed, Ravi? Rachel replied to the space and said, if Elon find boobs, the SEC would investigate. So I take away my recommendation.
Yeah, so hey, just one thing I just wanted to say really quickly in regards to trying to load compute clusters with things that are valuable. One of the things we have to realize is that you can try and achieve maximum efficiency of compute, but you're assuming that what you're putting on these CPUs matters. That's very difficult because any of us who have gone through comp sci master's degrees realizes, we schedule a lot of jobs that are just terrible. They're just showing us our errors. We're like, oh, this sucks. This sucks. Yep, this sucked. This sucks. So I'm just saying, when we talk about compute and what Tesla's doing, what anybody is doing with clustered and parallel compute, you have to take it with a grain of salt. We don't know from a software and data perspective how valid the loads are that are put onto that compute that consume that energy. You can waste that energy with a bunch of really crappy code. So, and again, I'm a Tesla fan and I invest because I think these guys are putting the best code on the chips. And that's a big deal. Thank you.
Bradford.
Yeah, maybe it's a minor point, but I would say when extrapolating things 6 years out in the future, like Elon is doing, probably these AI data center computers are going to be, or they could be like 8 times better than they are today. I think I don't know if the new one is like the B200, but allegedly it's like twice as good as the H100 or something like that. So they're
4
like
times in some cases.
Yeah, so like they're seemingly getting better by like at least 40% a year right now. So maybe it's just like 300,000 of the the Z800s or whatever it is going to be in 2030. So, and Jensen Huang had some interesting comments in his talk where he talked about like the power usage and the amount of compute and what that's going to look like. And I don't know if it was like 10 years or something like that, and how much the performance per watt and the amount of inference per dollar is going to shrink.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bradford's exactly right. When we run these figures and say they're going to need, X million GPUs by their calculation, that's not accounting for the fact that every year the GPUs are getting more performant for the same price and they're getting more energy efficient too. So you're really going to be able to add a lot more compute. So let's say, for example, you need 2 million H100s. Well, if the new system is the same price and it's 4 times as powerful, then now you only need 500,000, right? Then the next generation comes on, let's say it's twice as good, and then you only need 250,000. And it just keeps getting easier and easier.
Bradford, are you still holding on to one half of your NVIDIA shares, or did you buy back the other half? What's your status?
So I'll break a little news. So we sold out completely yesterday. And what drove that is we looked at some scenarios. So we
I thought you were gonna say the boo signing. Because
gonna,
Omar posted and said, "Is this the sign?" He retweeted the picture of Jensen signing boobs, and he said, "Is this the sign of a top?"
Yeah, I didn't see that picture before we sold. So I was a bit early in November. I thought they would do at least 100 billion in revenue this year and have like 60 billion in profits. I was beat Wall Street to this, and now it's look like they're going to handily exceed that, and they'll probably double the revenue again next year or so, and we'll see if they double the profit. So we were looking at a scenario where NVIDIA achieves that, and where we think the stock should be valued based off of where they're at. And we also looked at a scenario where maybe they do like 400 billion in revenue in a year. um I think it's unlikely to happen, but like that would be our bull scenario that would lead to like significant stock price improvement from these levels. So, I don't doubt that they're gonna do really well this year and even like double up next year potentially. Um, but I wonder where things go after that. Um, and yeah, neural net Neil had a good point in that you have to give these computers good work. You got to keep them busy. I don't doubt that like Tesla and others can do that, but that's got to be another tricky issue. And I'd say if you're Tesla or another like elite team, you can try to use AI to automate more of the processes. So maybe you can just keep using more and more compute. Uh, it's definitely a whole new world, but
Yeah.
we're a little
Hey,
skeptical
Omar.
like how big it can get.
Yeah. Omar Jensen yesterday, wasn't yesterday, the day before, he went around and talked about what's coming after Blackwell, even though Blackwell hasn't started shipping yet, which kind of brought me some flashbacks of Rivian presentation where they started talking about R3, even though R2 isn't even in production. What do you make of Jensen's kind of talking about the next generation of chip?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the pace of updates they're shipping. And this really gets to the heart of why Dojo did not replace NVIDIA. They actually did beat NVIDIA's A100 cluster, but they didn't beat the H100 cluster. Now they're working on getting the Dojo 2 up and running, but NVIDIA's got Blackwell, then they've got what's the new one? R something Rubin? Yeah, then they've got Rubin. And then they got the one after that. So the question here isn't who else is making AI training chips. Everybody's making AI training chips. We get that. The question is, when does the gap between NVIDIA and the rest of the pack narrow? For a while, Intel led the pack. Everybody was buying Intel chips. Now you can buy a better Intel compatible chip from AMD than you can from Intel. And the market is much more diversified. There's processors like ARM that have much better performance per watt in many ways. So that's really the question. It's about innovation fundamentally. It's not even about production. It's how long can they sustain an innovation lead? And that's really dependent entirely on the product cycle, which is why Jensen's really banging the drum on this.
We have a really strong board right now, speaker board. If anybody wants to come up and request to speak and ask questions, this is a really good time to do so. Finflex.
Yeah, so I saw a post, but I'm not sure whether it was true or not. Maybe someone can confirm about the Rubin platform. But it had some specs or something, but I don't think they revealed anything else other than just the name of the platform itself. Am I right, Omar?
Yeah, that's all I heard.
Neural net, Neil.
Hey, so just one comment I'd like to make. If this is proving out to be true, hardware is like the highways we drive on, right? And the software is the destination. So if that's the case, like I said before, I think hardware is going to start to outstrip software. And eventually you have to make these roads make value, right? Because if they don't, guess what? We're going to recycle them. That's what we're going to do. Just a thought.
So this is interesting. When he got up there, he said, "Hopefully, I don't regret this," referring to the Osborne effect. And he said that Rubin is going to have in 2026 when it's released, right? So this is 2024. We're talking about 2026. It's going to use HBM4, a new form of high bandwidth memory, the brand new NVLink 6 switch, capable of operating at 3.6 terabytes per second. And they are also revealing that they're going to have a new sort of TikTok production schedule. Intel popularized the idea of a TikTok production schedule where you have sort of a major architectural change and then sort of refining improvements to that architecture. And you kind of go 1 year is a tick, next year is a talk. Then the next year is a tick, the year after that's a talk. So interesting color he's giving about their future product plans there.
So, guys, for those interested, SpaceX has just been granted a launch license for IFT4.
Thank you for the news, Larry. Alex.
I have a Tesla question, if that's all right. So, my friend recently sent me a link about how Elon's trying to redirect the GPUs from Tesla to XAI. And he asked me, like, isn't this like a conflict of interest? And because I'm a shareholder, not a big one, just 234, but slowly building that pile. And my perspective was like, at this point,
Alex, first-time speakers are requested to ask questions.
oh,
You can
sorry.
only ask a question as a first-time speaker. And we talked about this topic in the first hour. You can go back and listen to it either on YouTube or X. But if you have a question, 10 words or fewer, has to start with a question word. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'll be quick. Basically,
Okay, sorry. I'll be quick. Basically, you have 4 words left. Okay. Yeah, I recommend people to kind of like pick up your favorite LLM, go and chat with it, and at the end say, formalize my question in 10 words. That's probably the best way to do it. Bradford.
All right. Yeah, in March, Elon said Tesla was no longer compute constrained, Alex. So that's where I first went this morning, and then we subsequently got an answer from Elon, basically saying that they don't have a place to put them. We also heard a rumor earlier this year that Elon was frustrated with the pace of the build out of the facilities where they want to place these. So it would be a conflict of interest if Tesla needed them and could place them today. But my guess, even before Elon clarified, was that that wasn't the case.
Yeah, it sounds like Tesla still is taking delivery of the same number of GPUs, and they're not being given to XAI and expensive Tesla.
Michael.
One other thing I'm trying to think through in that tweet from Elon around the power consumption of the training versus inference compute. He said that 100 million vehicles would be about 100 gigawatts worth of power consumption of AR hardware in the cars. From what I remember, the FSD computer is about 72 watts. He's implying in there 1,000 watts per car. So that's a significant difference. Obviously, there's cooling in other parts, um, but I wonder what that might mean.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So the car and the computer, I'm wondering like how it, and maybe like Green Day only could tell us this, but you have the inference car, but you also have the computer that's in the car, and you probably need that running too. So I'm wondering if he's counting, both the main computers and not just like the inference computer there.
Could be. He likes big numbers.
And maybe 1 kilowatt is like the base load on the Tesla when it's on. Maybe that's like the minimum.
What he wrote is a lot of words to say. Dojo sucks. I could have written that tweet in 2 words. Dojo sucks. Okay. But he can't say that. So he had to write all those words.
Damn it.
He knew I would figure out what it meant.
That's funny because I was literally about to ask you, can you summarize this conversation for those who just joined? And that's great. All right. Do you want to talk about Taylor Rogan's post?
Oh yeah, sure. One thing I'll mention is that Tesla did expand FSD 12.4 to more employees last night. So some employees who hadn't gotten it before were able to get it. I've heard feedback from employees that it seems to be a little bit of a step back, not quite ready to go out to everybody. I'll summarize some of the feedback I heard. Some people said it's just a little bit hesitant on turns. Other people said that they had some phantom braking events, which they didn't experience on 12.3, that it was still kind of indecisive with some lane changes going back and forth, that there was sometimes some hard acceleration on green lights and some hard braking and some hesitancy on turns. So it sounds like that's the reason why we haven't gotten it yet in the customer's hands. And I would expect to see maybe a 12.4.1 hopefully go out to employees this week. And then we could maybe see it get into customers' hands after that.
Thank you. So how many people do you think have it now? Just a few hundred?
Probably a few thousand. It
Few
seems to have
thousand.
gone out to most of Wave 1, which is even, Tesla Service Center showroom employees.
Okay. I pinned at the top Taylor Rogan's. He says he has a video, sped up video of about 4 minutes showing Lockseed S7 as LiDAR, no HD maps, 11 HD cameras, 3mm wave radars, and 12 ultrasonic sensors with significant onboard compute. Huawei's ADS 2.0 in Shenzhen. What do you think of this video?
Yeah, Huawei, they've been around for some time. I haven't really looked into uh, what this system is. I mean, they have the Huawei sort of driving system in a different bunch of different cars. But my understanding was it was still kind of limited to certain areas or something. I'd probably have to do a little bit of Googling to see what the latest is with their system, as it obviously isn't available outside of China. Huawei is a company that has been known to have some relationships with the Chinese government, and they're widely used in telecom around the world. For example, cell towers around the world, 5G towers, things like that. They're a major player in phones and telecom. The US government has put sanctions against them in many cases. They disallow using Huawei technology in their procurement and things like that because of concerns of Chinese government spying. So that puts them at a little bit of a competitive disadvantage globally, but I think they're probably one of the strongest technology wise in China. So I'd have to do a little more research before um, really making an informed statement because, to be honest, I mean, I've heard about them. They've been there for many years. It's not exactly a new thing, but I haven't been following the development of the system very much.
Okay. He has a thread below that tweet. Taylor has been critical of Tesla over the years. So take it with a grain of salt. But I thought this was an interesting data point. He says this ride was 40 minutes straight. The model is popular among DJI, Huawei, and Tencent engineers who compare their commits disengagements. He also has some stats on the car. Car $45,000, goes 0 to 60 in 3.3, 800-volt architecture. The feature, ADAS feature, costs $3,588. Lockseed S7 is a crossover SUV coming in a few months. Will have Huawei ADS 3.0 and a 100 kilowatt-hour battery option. So we'll keep an eye on this, and then once Omar does some research, we'll revisit the topic. Bradford, as an investor, what does this thread data point? How do you think about these? Let's say competition for FSD in China.
Yeah, so Taylor has me blocked. So what I go back to for now is that I don't know if it's a CNBC reporter that went to China and they tried to get the robotaxi, but they couldn't get a robotaxi without a safety driver. And when they could get a robotaxi, it was only limited routes. So I'm skeptical until I see some real videos. Maybe this is one, but I'd want to see videos from multiple users. Not just like one take from a company. And maybe Omar, you could talk a little bit about that piece that we saw from the CNBC reporter or whatever it was.
Yeah, we talked about that video before in previous spaces. Omar is welcome to obviously comment on it again. Neil, go ahead.
Just wanted to say I would posit this is my assumption, and I would like to get feedback, better or worse, that FSD in China is a software problem, not a hardware problem.
Yes, I'm just reading a research report. I'll just kind of read it out loud here. So Huawei ADS 2.0 launched in May of 2023, and it is a new version of their Huawei ADS, which the primary new feature is that it relies less on HD maps. So you don't need to have a LiDAR scan of the area. But it's interesting, they're still kind of mentioning it launch city by city. They say the company plans to promote its mapless without high definition maps ADAS in 15 cities in Q2 and 45 cities by the end of this year. So even though there's no HD maps, they're kind of still doing it city by city for some reason.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then it says ADS 2.0 has been trained on a massive data set of real world driving data, which has helped improve its safety. ADS 2.0 can now drive up to 200 kilometers without manual intervention, up from 100 kilometers in ADS 1.0, making it more practical for everyday use. With massive data training and AI powered technology, the system demonstrates driving performance equal to that of an experienced driver, and it has automatic parking. So, yeah, it has 120. It requires 128 beam lidar, 11 HD cameras, 3 millimeter wave radars, and 12 ultrasonic sensors. So they have a more, traditional sensor suite. It's probably going to be a little bit more expensive, but yeah, I mean,
Well,
ultimately,
so that's what I'm always surprised about that, because they have so many sensors, and the tweet says they're selling the feature at $3,500. I mean, it can't possibly be profitable at
it's
that level.
about. It looks like it's about $5,200. So, it's comparable in
Oh,
price,
okay.
I think, to FSD. But they're probably losing money. There's only one company that sells EVs that's really making money, and it's Li Auto. So I'm guessing the companies that are including this are probably just taking a loss on the vehicle, and including lidar and everything, but just kind of putting it out as a showpiece, right? This isn't really, with the sensor suite that you see here, something that can be included in every car. And that's, I think, what really sets Tesla apart, is that they include their own autonomy sensor suite in every car. Any car can activate it with the Trio. There's a huge install base out there. If they, enable robotaxi, there's a bunch of cars that can run it. So I think that's obviously enabled by having a very low cost sensor suite. So that's one sort of advantage they have. But ultimately, what it comes down to is just driving it, right? How does it drive? You can look great on paper, but are you driving the car well, or are you not driving the car well? They say they can do about 200 kilometers. So that seems to be around, the same ballpark as FSD, according to their claims. But, I'd have to maybe look at more videos to see how it drives in more detail.
Neil.
So one more thing I'd like to posit is that a global model is not desirable. It could be achievable, but perhaps it's not desirable. And again, I think I've had this conversation with Meta and some others over time, but it's like, listen, if you can localize training and get a win autonomously, why wouldn't you do that? Right now, again, you're going to localize the training to get that autonomous win in that specific geography. It doesn't speak to a global model, but like, we need to win locally, right, before we win globally. That is my theory. Maybe I'm wrong.
Omar, would you like to respond to that?
I think global scale is really important. It's really helpful. It helps you spread out your costs, and if you actually drive in more areas, it makes it better in each of those places. So I think what Tesla's really shooting at, and what nobody else is really trying, is being a global leader, driving in North America, driving in Europe, and driving in China. Nobody's trying that, including Huawei. And I think it seems to me like, based on Huawei's own figures, Tesla is already better with their pure vision approach than Huawei is with all these sensors. Because 200 kilometers is about 124 miles. 100 kilometers for the 1.0 system was about 60 miles. So even today, with the pure vision system, which is improving rapidly, I think the community tracker shows it as ahead of Huawei, based on Huawei's own marketing, which is probably inflated. And it sounds like they're only launching it in select cities, whereas FSD is designed to work in any city. And then, let's say the performance was equal and Tesla didn't have a lead, then it really comes down to cost, right? If the performance is equal, but one requires dramatically less hardware, then I think that system ultimately wins. So, 124 miles per intervention is impressive if it's true, but it's definitely squarely in the realm of ADAS systems, right? So it sounds like it's an ADAS system. It sounds like it's one to take a look at, but it sounds like it requires more hardware, only available in select cities on select cars, not available on all models, and even still doesn't seem to have the performance of FSD Pure Vision. Now, of course, when Tesla launches in China, who knows what their performance will be? It could be much worse than that initially. So we'll have to see how that launch in China goes ultimately.
Thank you. Finflexity.
Yeah. So, well, your Huawei actually also partners with BYD for the same mapping technology that Tesla is trying to license. The Elon meeting was about getting high definition maps from Baidu.
Hey, just wanted to say,
And
Omar, that was good. Yes, I agree. I'm just trying to accelerate, right? I'm just
Neil, it sounds like you can't hear. I'm going to move you down and then bring you back up. Finflex, please continue.
Anyway, so they signed the deal this year only, and BYD was actually invited to join the deal, but BYD rejected and said that they will develop their own ADAS system. So that's interesting as well.
Thank you. Neil, go ahead.
I think I'm back. I'm sorry, I have Comcast. It's a shared resource, but just wanted to say, no, I appreciate Omar's response, and ultimately a global versus a local model. All I'm trying to think of is how can we accelerate autonomy? Even though I believe the global model is probably the best, I just think about localized training, trying to somehow accelerate autonomy in these narrow scenarios. So I don't know.
Omar?
Maybe it's not right.
Yeah, I'm
Omar?
continuing to read this research here from Counterpoint Research. And one interesting point that they mention is Huawei said that they will not make cars and that they are not going to use the Huawei branding at all when they partner with car makers. So the feature will actually be branded under the car maker's name, and you won't know that it's a Huawei system, probably because of those sort of international export restrictions and stuff like that that I mentioned. So it's really kind of interesting how they're positioning themselves there. They're not a car maker. They're just purely focused on the software piece, and they want to sell to other car makers, white label.
I mean, with that kind of sensor suite, there's no way they're going to be able to compete against Tesla, let alone the hardware cost. Even if the hardware cost came down, just the sensor fusion and the energy cost to run that system is going to be per mile is going to be insane. So
Yeah, I think you're right. There would be more energy usage. It would be less aero efficient. There would definitely be downsides. The question really is, can you exceed the performance of that system with pure vision? And I think you probably could, honestly. It sounds like they're already doing it.
I mean, even if you couldn't, let's say Tesla gets to, just hypothetically, Tesla gets to millions of miles between safety critical disengagements, and then system like that gets to 10, 20 million miles. Will the customer care that much if it costs twice as much per mile?
I don't know. I would think they'd
Open
probably
question.
go for what's cheap and available as long as they feel safe with it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Squid. Squid, you have to unmute yourself for us to hear you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, what's your question?
So I just had a comment I wanted to add. Personally, I'm a really big fan of the approach that Tesla's taking for pure vision. To me, that just kind of seems like the only approach to actually getting, achieving full self-driving in any, um, you know, unvisited place before. Whereas, some companies are limiting their areas and, basically hard coding every single, street and stuff. That doesn't really, I think that approach is extremely limiting, and it doesn't, will get beat out by, Tesla's approach in the long term. Whereas in the short term, that might be the best thing right now.
Okay.
But just real quickly to go even beyond
Thank
that.
you. Finflexity, go ahead. Yeah, first time speakers are limited to ask questions, 10 words or fewer. Finflexity?
To what you were saying, Yaman, earlier, that it doesn't matter whether it's a million miles per disengagement or 20 million miles per disengagement, as long as the cost is lower. They actually did a research out of, Cornell for this last year only. So they questioned a lot of basically customers, and they asked them whether you would rather have a GPT that costs like $1 for, per interaction, but had 99.05% accuracy, or would you rather pay $5 for 100% accuracy and the 99% one, drastically well with businesses?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm gonna ask. So, half hour mark. We have half hour left to the end of the space. Throughout the space, we get people kind of circling. I mean, some people stay the entire time, but sometimes people join the first half. Sometimes people join the second half. So I'm going to ask Omar to summarize what we discussed about the CNBC article that came out today and Elon's responses in a little bit. Before that, I'm going to read a post by Sawyer. Sawyer says, Tesla hired Geico executive Alan Laban to help reduce insurance costs for Tesla owners. Alan posted on LinkedIn, looks like, or some website. I'm thrilled to share that I started a newly created role at Tesla as their head of strategic insurance partnerships. Here's my goal in this role: make Tesla vehicles easy and economical to insure. By partnering with insurance companies, teams across Tesla, and collision shops in the US and Canada, will lower the total cost of Tesla ownership and accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. When I heard about the opportunity late last year, I was skeptical. Why would Tesla, which already has its own insurance company, care about the rates other insurance companies charge Tesla owners? Because of the mission. Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. High insurance premiums on EVs will slow this transition. That's where the insurance partnerships part of the job comes in. Through better communication, processes, and partnerships, we will reduce repair costs and lower insurance prices across the industry. But what am I most excited about? The people. Even in my short time with Tesla, I've met scores of remarkable people nationwide. They've shown me once again that there's opportunity everywhere and that the future is bright. This is very good. Very good, Alan. All right. Omar, would you mind summarizing the discussion from earlier about the CNBC article and Elon's posts and your exchange with Ravi as well, please?
Yeah. So in 9 days, Tesla shareholders are going to be asked to vote on Musk's compensation plan and some other issues. And I think there's going to be a lot of efforts ramping up to paint him as not doing his job, misappropriating resources for X instead of Tesla, basically making people want to vote no. And I think this story is one of those examples. I don't think that there's anything here that harmed Tesla. I don't think Tesla was harmed. And I don't think that they're pulling any punches in expanding their compute as fast as they possibly can. So in the story, Laura Kolodny, who is a beat reporter on Tesla for CNBC, who has been writing investigative pieces about Tesla for many years and, negative pieces, working with short sellers in many cases. So that's kind of her slant. She's looking for the negative angle. That's kind of what she does. It's her job. And she cited an internal memo in NVIDIA, so an internal email in NVIDIA, where they said, Elon has asked us to take the 12,000 H100 GPUs we were supposed to deliver to Tesla in December and to deliver them to XAI instead. And instead, Tesla's going to take the 12,000 GPUs that XAI ordered, which they were supposed to take delivery of in January and in June. And some people said, well, did Tesla pay for the GPUs and give them to XAI? That sounds illegal. That sounds like they're using Tesla's money for XAI. That's not the case. That's not what CNBC alleged happened. What they're just talking about is swapping the order delivery dates. And Tesla, now it's June. I assume, they've taken delivery a lot of these they have about 35,000 H100s, and they've guided that they're planning to have about 85,000 by the end of the year. So Elon came out today and he said, well, the reason that we did this is that we are planning to build a new data center at Giga Texas to house Dojo and also this new NVIDIA cluster of 50,000 H100s. But the construction on that has been delayed. So we decided to have XAI take this order, and we're going to take the order that comes after that. And then, Tim Zaman also shared just kind of some images of a few hundred GPUs just to give people a sense of the scale of what this is. It's really sort of a massive industrial operation. So Tesla was actually saved some time and money. These contracts are usually take or pay. So you either take them or you have to pay anyway, even if you don't take them. And they would have essentially had to put these in a warehouse because the facility isn't ready. Like, we're really talking about, a massive data center here. You see these pictures of racks, but you're really talking about, thousands and thousands of computer systems, networking, huge power requirements, right? So you really have to, probably talk to the grid operator and make sure everything's good on an infrastructure level. It's a very complicated endeavor, obviously. So, a lot of people are basically saying, okay, this is conflict of interest. He's trying to go to XAI, take everything there. I don't really see it that way. I think both companies are building out their compute aggressively. I don't think you can say Tesla isn't getting the compute they need. They're obviously doubling compute in the last quarter, and the quarter before that, they doubled compute as well. So they're really growing compute at a pretty astounding pace, I think. And I don't see them as really competing right now. I know that they both are have AI as a main focus, right? Elon says Tesla's an AI and robotics company, and XAI has AI in the name. But AI is very broad. So I don't believe it's in Tesla's best interest to train a large language model right now. It costs millions of dollars per training run. It would really cost billions of dollars. If they had 100,000 GPUs, those need to be dedicated to FSD and Optimus, not a language model. And I think it is not really at a time when Tesla's core business is challenged, something they should be doing. So I don't see there as really being any overlap. I don't think it makes sense for Tesla to do a language model. I think the goals of these two companies are very different, although, there may be some competition for talent. There may be, both GPUs that they need. I don't think there's a lot of overlap in their business today, right? One is making money selling cars and FSD subscriptions and robots, and the other is making an LLM. And, Optimus, for example, the manufacturing scale of Tesla it draws on, that's not something that XAI is easily going to be able to replicate. So I think they're very different companies today. I don't think Tesla's necessarily getting shortchanged, but I suppose it's possible if the vote didn't pass, and Musk ended up leaving the company because he essentially got pushed out by this referendum, then it's possible, he has this sort of alternative training compute, and that maybe he could put future AI projects there, as he kind of alluded to.
Thank you. And your exchange with Ravi and Michael with the power consumption, would you summarize it as well, please?
Yeah, I think Elon mentioned some of the power consumption figures he thought for what the training would use versus the inference at scale. Um, we talked about just the massive power requirements of not only the training cluster, the DGX H100 systems, but also the InfiniBand networking, the optical repeaters, the cooling for the data centers. So, yeah, it's quite an endeavor to bring these things up. It's not really that, okay, we've got these for delivery, we can just kind of take them and turn them on. It's really kind of a massive industrial scale construction project. And if Tesla wasn't ready to take delivery and XAI could, that saves Tesla from A, having to warehouse them, but also B, having to give NVIDIA the cash for the chips. If they can just push the delivery out to a time slot that's actually preferable to them in terms of lining up with the construction timeline, then it actually saves them money and time and a headache. So I don't really think it's as scandalous as they kind of made it out to be. There was another misconception she had in the story where she said, oh, well, NVIDIA also said in an internal memo that the $10 billion Musk says he's going to spend doesn't match up with our internal sales forecasts. But that counts the car computers, right? So he's counting probably $2 to $4 billion of car computers in that $10 billion. He's counting probably $1 billion of Dojo as well. And then he's counting NVIDIA, which he says is, about a third of that, $3 to $4 billion. So, yeah, I think a lot of times people can kind of hear things like this and ascribe some super nefarious motives, but it sounds like Tesla was not really harmed here. It sounds like Tesla was maybe actually helped by the fact that they were able to do this. And it's not really changing the overall number of GPUs they have. They just took delivery in January and June as opposed to in December. But it's not like they're pulling any punches on scaling Tesla's training compute because of XAI.
Okay, thank you. We have another bear on the board, Aristotle. First time speaking, I believe, but we had exchanged replies on X before. What's your take on this? As a reminder, we have 15 minutes to go, 15 minutes, after which Patreon after party will start. And I also have a quick announcement to make. The subscriptions are open. With Sawyer and Omar's and others' help, X was able to open my subscriptions. However, there's a catch. When I first signed up for this program last year, my plan and the goal with the subscriptions was different. And, I had a few people who just kind of tested me to apply, and I did. But I was really adamant about having this Tesla Life space be completely free and open for everybody. And so I didn't want anyone to sign up at that point. And so I picked the highest amount possible to disincentivize people subscribing. And now I can't change it. Apparently you can't change it. So I'm trying to change it to $5, but right now it is the highest amount allowed by the platform. So I don't expect anyone to sign up or anything like that. But if you try and see that sticker shock, that's why. So until we can change it, or I hear that X is trying to start tiered subscriptions. So maybe they'll allow me to add a tier at $5 a month. Until then, I'll keep the Patreon after parties going. But hopefully, eventually, at some point, I'm going to be able to transition from Patreon to X subscription. All right. Aristotle, go.
Okay, so thank you for having me on. Hello, everyone. I would just like to get the bull's perspective on this matter, and therefore I would like to propose a challenge. Seeing Elon's reply to this matter by saying that they do not have a place where they can activate the NVIDIA chips just made me wonder how come when a company this large and with so many resources decides to refocus its strategy, seeing how the core automotive business has been in decline, it is very hard to rule out the fact that the automotive fundamentals have been deteriorating. We all know the story. Unit volumes have been dwindling. Gross margins have been under pressure. And it is clearly evident if you follow sales numbers, including this quarter. Now, when a company reaches such a situation, it only makes sense when it has such large aspirations to double down on what appears to be the most lucrative route. And everyone's here for AI and self-driving. So it only makes sense that the core strategy will shift in that vector. Now, the challenge that I would like to raise here is how come that an element so crucial and so critical to the company's future success gets mishandled in such a way that when the order finally arrives of these highly sought after NVIDIA products, they do not have the infrastructure in place to support and activate them in order to make the most of the capital that they have had to expend on this resource. Now,
Okay.
okay,
Yeah,
I can elaborate.
This is way too. No, this is way too much elaboration. I usually limit people to 10 words or fewer. The reason why you're allowed to go on a little bit longer is because you're a bear, and I want a bit. We don't have many bears, so I want a bit of balance. But like, if I ask someone to repeat what you said, they're not going to be able to, because this is way too verbose. Okay.
Well, that
So
said,
I
I'd still
recommend
like to get your perspective on this.
Okay,
Genuinely
Omar.
curious.
Yeah, so I mean, I would refer you to the last couple of earnings decks. They've been expanding their training compute at a pretty rapid pace. When they brought the first 15,000 H100s on, they more than doubled their training compute that quarter, and then they more than doubled it again. Now they're over 35,000. They're going to bring another 50,000 online. The first 35,000 are in California, so there's going to be 3 facilities. One in California, one in Texas, and then one in their Buffalo, New York facility. So the one in California is kind of maxed out. They're out of room. Power is also a bottleneck. Like, power has been an issue for them since the beginning. They talk about like blowing one of the local transformers when they first turned on Dojo. And I think there's also just the issue of cost. Electricity in California is much more expensive than in Texas, where there's a lot of low cost renewables and lower cost producers. So I think that's another reason to move it into Texas. But it sounds like construction has been a little delayed. It's taken a little bit longer than they've expected. So that's, I think, part of the reason why they weren't ready to take delivery. But they have said in their most recent earnings deck that they plan to take delivery and have these up and running before the end of 2024.
And don't you find it alarming that a company this large and with so many resources on hand struggles with some of the more, let's call it, basic elements of getting the whole thing set up? Because construction is not reinventing the wheel in any way, shape, or form, right?
No, I mean, I don't see it that way. I think when you look at the pace of their expansion and training compute, it's pretty remarkable. You don't see many other companies doubling their training cluster quarter over quarter for the last 2 quarters and continuing to do that, double it again before the end of the year.
Yeah.
So,
And then there's also the macro backdrop here too with construction. Construction obviously has been very limited and bottlenecked in recent years, and it is one of the few areas of the overall economy that is still bottlenecked. If you look at for example, residential construction, there is a multi-year lag between construction start and completions. This is the longest it's been since, I think, in decades, definitely. I think since the 70s. So,
I mean, it's not rocket science. They already got the factory up. I have no doubt they're going to get the construction done and get this thing up before the end of the year. They have so much
okay.
room in that factory.
We have Adrian on the board as well. So let's go to him. We have 9 minutes left. Adrian, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, you guys? Just a little quick thing regarding the bearish take. I'm not sure if you realize this or not, but many of his companies at the moment, especially Tesla Boring Company, they are building a lot of infrastructure. It's amazing how much they're actually doing. And if you want to go, say, by stock market provenance in order to make any assessment of a company, I think you should also include that at the moment, as a market, we are experiencing a lot of financial difficulties, right? Everywhere. And of course, you can imagine that big ticket items such as cars are heavily affected by this in terms of demand. And I'm pretty sure you can also see other car companies not seeing their demand go up. Especially, I think that we're approaching a time in which Toyota, for instance, will experience its death very soon. We will see this within our own lifetimes, perhaps in 10 years or so. Of course, you'll have the government buy them out and, waste the taxpayers' money on something that's definitely going to die. But beyond that, its organic death should be in 5 to 10 years, based off of this alone, right? So I don't really see what the point here is. And also, I think another interesting thing that the bears seem to forget a lot of the time is, why on earth would Elon, of all people, who has most, if not all of his wealth in Tesla, sabotage himself? That's got to be like the most retarded thought process anyone can ever conceptualize. It hurts my brain to even think about it. Like, seriously. Why would you hurt your own net worth intentionally? And at the same time, what also people don't understand, this is really cool, by the way, because, again, this compute would have just sat there cold. Since he has multiple companies, he's now able to use this compute temporarily at XAI to make their AI better. And, you may think to yourself, why would you want this? Are you aware of the fact that some of the major AI providers are currently offline? Are you aware of this? It's dead. Nothing's happening. Grok is still working. We need this. This is why this happens. This is important. Without your AI functioning, how are you going to understand what's happening in the world most of the time? Your browser is shit. This is something. And now everyone's AIs don't work. Do you see how this is something that's important?
Yeah, I can provide a perfectly clear response to that. I mean, considering how much in demand those NVIDIA products are today, and given that there is an active market for them as we speak, many companies are playing with large cost of capital plays where they deploy this compute and sell it. Essentially, this means that Tesla's possession of those NVIDIA products has a market value over time. And I find it quite alarming that they have not made use of those rights. So if you have a perspective on that, I would love to hear it.
Sorry, are you saying Tesla should have sold it? Hold on. Are you saying Tesla should have taken delivery and then sold it in the resale market?
No, this is not what I'm saying. This is absolutely not what I'm saying.
So he's stating that they're not using it. They are using it at XAI.
All right.
Yeah,
Aristotle, you have to raise your hand and wait your turn like everybody else. And next time, please come earlier in the space. We have 6 minutes left. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I posted an article with a little bit more detail on the construction delays in Texas, and Aristotle might benefit from reading that article. And basically, it comes down to they had delivery issues, bad weather, and common construction headwinds. And data center owners are facing a scarcity of reputable builders that have the right diversification of experience. So they need experience with solar, industrial, water, and data centers under one roof, and that's a very rare skill set among construction experts.
Pennington.
I think what the bear is trying to say is why order when you don't have the ability to use? So why spend money when you don't have the ability to use? Number one. And to Adrian's point, he mentioned a lot of bull points. And why would Elon want to hurt his investment? He has so much money tied up in this. But nobody could dispute that his actions towards purchasing Twitter, selling shares, etc., he knew that was going to be a political firestorm. He had to have known that was going to hurt his stock, and he did it nonetheless. So there's 2 different ways to look at the same exact point.
Negligible impact.
Yeah. Aristotle.
So when it comes to construction expertise available on market, I would personally expect of a company so significant to have redundancy plans in place to make sure that the capital expenditure on those NVIDIA products, which, just to remind you, Tesla's operating income last quarter was only $200 million. This is significantly less than they are expending on those NVIDIA products. So I would have expected to have a more robust execution plan in place. So this is point number one, which I would like to be addressed. And point number two, when it comes to the market value of those NVIDIA products and their right of use, suppose that there are other customers in NVIDIA's backlog. They perhaps could have paid money to take Tesla's order and have this swap made. Such a swap, which allows a different customer to take possession of this product earlier in time when it is so sought after, has a market value, which is my point. And I would really like to understand why has this
okay, Adrian.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of repetition here and not really anything of substance that's being brought up, if I'm being quite honest. And okay, so here's the thing. Okay, let's say that there is political risk of buying something like Twitter and turning it into X. Do you not understand that that's an exceedingly valuable long-term investment, especially for Tesla and all the other companies? How are you using, for instance, Grok right now? Okay, so we're back to the compute question. The computer is now at XAI, and it's doing something for Grok. By the way, one of the only AIs you can use at the moment, which is funny enough, isn't it? Right, this is temporary, of course. You are using it via the platform. You can now also use it via the website, of course, but you are using it via the platform. You'll also have access to the information on the platform via this AI in a way that no other browser will be able to provide you, because most of the information and practically all of the news breaks on here first. Now, this is a valuable investment that's kind of like, it integrates itself into everything else. You're going to be using the X app on Tesla as you're driving it because you're going to be bored as hell because your Tesla will be driving you. So I'm struggling to see how exactly this is negative.
Omar.
So the bear asked, shouldn't they have just sold this consideration to the NVIDIA cards to somebody else, because this allocation is so valuable? They could have sold that spot for a lot of money instead of just giving it to XAI. But that allocation is so valuable that it would be extremely foolish to give it up just for cash, right? I mean, they need to use these GPUs. They desperately need them. Both companies do. So, if anything else, they'd just take it and probably warehouse it and just pay to store it rather than sell it to somebody else and lose an allocation that NVIDIA is not necessarily going to assign you an allocation again or make up for all those GPUs. So it makes sense to do a consideration, which is just a swap for swap, right? We're swapping 15,000 GPUs for 15,000 GPUs. It's just a difference of what month you take delivery. And these are usually take or pay contracts. So if they refuse to take delivery, they would have had to pay anyway. So it kind of is a situation that works out in their favor. They still get the GPUs they want, but they don't have to outlay the cash or warehouse them until a time that's more closely aligned with the completion of construction.
Okay, great. Great. All right, 2 hours. 2 hours is the deal. Aristotle, thank you for joining us today. Tomorrow, you're welcome to come back and come back early so that we can continue this discussion. And we do need more bears in the space, but please try to be succinct. Don't repeat your points and have more substance on them. And I think maybe over time we can get there. All right, thank you very much, everybody. And I will chat with you tomorrow. Take care.